these spoilers for JJK 218 finally just confirmed that Yorozu is just definitely above Yuta, Rika, Yuki, Kenjaku, and all the other high tiers. As crazy and just outlandish as it sounds, it's really undeniable at this point. And if you disagree with me, or if you're curious about what I just said, I really recommend watching this whole video, because man, there's a lot to get into with these spoilers. And of course, if you like JJK content or JJK videos, I would definitely recommend subscribing to the channel. I got a ton of what ifs, power scaling versus battles, and a ton of live streams too. I have reactions, discussions, reviews, even one for this chapter going up today too. Leaving a like on this video does help out too. Thank you if you did. And lastly, thanks to all the Honored One and Special Grade members of the channel, Jujutsu Kaisen, The Worst Box, and That Guy Trey. Thank you guys very much. Okay, now before we get into all the crazy scaling stuff and all of the implications that this chapter has, because there's a lot to go over for that, first I'll briefly break down everything we saw in this chapter, because that's pretty important too. Okay, so in the beginning of the chapter, we actually get to see Yorozu naked, so that's cool, I guess. She's got really nice eyebrows though, and it does disprove the theory that I thought perhaps Yorozu may have been an ascended human like Sukuna and Tengen because of some words that were exchanged. I guess that's not the case, or it still might be, and maybe we're just seeing an early version of Yorozu, because again, this is a Yorozu that we see in the past that, remember, is much younger than the Yorozu that existed in her prime in the Heian era. The reason we know this is because this is a Yorozu that's actually developing her curse technique. So of course, this Yorozu is one who is just starting out and figuring things out. And we actually get to find out that because her cursed energy output for her curse technique specifically isn't the best, she actually, in a very smart way, uses bugs and amplifies her body that way, because hey, bugs can actually use energy very efficiently. So considering the knowledge that she had back then, which is not modern knowledge, that's actually incredible that she figured that all out. And of course, we see she actually doesn't let Sukuna cancel Mahoruga out. Now of course, one of two things is happening here. Either A, Sukuna actually did do what he wanted to do, and the wheel which is on his back the entire chapter actually maybe that he's using Mahoruga's technique in his base, which is a possibility. Or it's option B, just like how Megumi wasn't able to summon Mahoruga because Sukuna grabbed his hands, maybe she actually did the same because she insta-blitzes and just socks him right in the face. Now of course, right after that disgusting punch, Sukuna tries to react with the divine dogs, but Yorozu actually takes his back and then kicks his face in, and Sukuna is bleeding. And by the way, we have never seen Sukuna this pressed other than the time that One-Fingered Sukuna fought Gojo. I just want you to realize how insane all of this is. And it's so insane to the point that Sukuna, we've seen even when he's fighting seriously or semi-seriously against Jogo, Ryu, and Mahoruga, even when he's definitely not taking it easy, he actually still smiles and laughs, especially in the Mahoruga fight. Well, as we see now, as he's getting putty, he's no longer smiling. He's got a very serious face and a very angry face at that. And what makes this even more crazy is that as Yorozu proceeds to actually try to force him to use cleave, we see a very menacing look in Sukuna's eyes. I'm gonna be honest, I don't think we've ever seen Sukuna this bloodlusted, because the look in his eye is just insane. Like, he is not just annoyed or fed up, he wants to kill her. This is not just a serious Sukuna, which we've been getting. This is a bloodlusted Sukuna now, which again, I'm just so happy to see. It's so crazy to see. And actually, I should clarify this now. I won't be showing the panels of chapters in this video. Showing chapter panels already puts you at risk for a copyright strike, but showing panels of a spoiler chapter, you actually have the risk of having your whole channel taken down. So I do apologize, but I won't be doing it. Now to continue, Sukuna actually summons two more Shikigami. So the first is the Madoka Deer, which is so amazing. I was talking about this with Jay on Twitter. He actually loves the design. Crazy enough, it can actually heal you with reverse curse technique. And I saw some people saying, oh, this is pointless. Sukuna can use reverse curse technique. What's the point of this? Actually, that's not the case. Considering that we've seen Shikigami such as Mahoruga actually self-sufficient, and Mahoruga doesn't use cursed energy from Megumi, and at some sort of baseline, they do have their own cursed energy, though of course we've seen later on Sukuna adds his output to his current Shikigami. What this deer implies is that without using the user's own cursed energy, it can actually use a reverse curse technique. Or even if it does use cursed energy, it is using a very small amount compared to the immense amount that you would need to actually heal yourself. So it is basically using reverse curse technique at a very, very cheap cost. And then right after, we see Sukuna summon his bull. And just to clarify, there were only 3 Shikigami which we've never seen. This chapter we get 2 of them, the deer and the bull. There is still one more Shikigami Sukuna may be saving for later that we have yet to see of the 10 shadows. Now obviously this bull rams Yorozu, and Yorozu takes it pretty well, honestly. And then obviously we get the confirmation, which we already knew, that Sukuna is amplifying all of these Shikigami with his cursed energy output. So of course that's making them a lot stronger, a lot faster. And if you're confused by what output does, don't worry, I'll explain that in the second half of the video. But yes, it just confirms that's why his Shikigami are way stronger than Megumi's, which I guess we already knew, obviously. And then Yorozu tries to stop the bull, but she is surprised, and she even punches it. Here's the interesting part. The bull actually tanks the attack far better than even Sukuna can. Now, there's 2 reasons for this. The first one, which is confirmed, is because of the bull's technique. Basically, the more distance it travels, the stronger it becomes. Keep in mind, this is already being amped by Sukuna's cursed energy output, so as strong as it already is with that, imagine now it's just getting stronger and stronger the more it goes. But of course, it has the downside downside of it just only being able to move in a straight line, which I did question, why doesn't Yorozu just fly in the air, because it can't fly and it only moves in a straight line. And of course, the second possibility as to why this thing is so powerful, and again, this is not confirmed, but it's probably true. If you remember the propeller guy, Haba, and also with the jetpack girl, and she was too much of a scrub for me to remember names, sorry, they both had binding vows where they are far stronger where their technique is. So for example, Haba, the helicopter guy, and hashtag RIP my boy, I hope he is resting well, he is actually far sturdier and far stronger at the top of his head, but in exchange the rest of his body is weaker. So if you attack his legs, they'd be super weak, but of course his head is strong. I am just going to theorize that it's possible that the bull has a similar binding vow, where just like an actual bull, the top of its head is way stronger at its strongest point, but perhaps in exchange for this, the rest of its body is a lot weaker. The reason I say this is because it does have an armor plate on its head that has also a clear X on it, so it's like baiting the opponent to actually attack it. So at the very least, the first point explains why its defense is so powerful, because output does confirmed at least affect attack and defense, which I'll explain later, don't worry. And of course the second point, which would be another binding vow to explain why it's just so sturdy and why it tanked an attack that Sukuna couldn't tank. Well, I mean, Sukuna could tank it, but the bull tanked it way better. Hits Yorozu again, and Yorozu's mask actually starts to break, and we can see she's getting pressured. And Sukuna summons Rabbit Escape, and much to my, not to say disappointment, but I was hoping the Rabbit Escape would be something demonic or really evil, like the rabbits in ReZero. He just summons normal rabbits, but the reason he does this is to actually completely block her view so she can't see what's coming next. And what's coming next? Sukuna, by the way, confirmed, I guess he can skywalk like Sanji, because if you look at the panel, he's actually kicking the air and not flying, but in the same way Sanji and CP9 do in One Piece, he can actually just walk on the air because he's kicking it with such force. So I guess he can do that now. He's just that strong. While Yorozu's vision is blinded, he summons a now amped and much stronger Max Elephant to crush her, and the force of this is so immense that it actually destroys part of the stadium around them, and as we see in the next chapter, eviscerates the ground that they stood at, creating a massive meteor. What's impressive about all of this is that Yorozu is actually pretty fine. Yes, she's roughed up, but there's no bloodstains and there's no cuts on her. Now, a way Gege actually showcases how damaged characters are, there's basically a lot of versions. So the first one, a character's just roughed up, as we see with Yorozu, and this is actually similar to what Kashimo had throughout his fight with Akari, where throughout the fight when he'd get punched, he would obviously bleed from his mouth, but he actually never got any serious damage such as wounds or had any blood marks on his body, and he was just roughed up throughout the fight. And then obviously we see with later characters, you have blood covered all over you, or you at least have a lot of cuts to showcase that you have taken a next level of damage. So we've seen this Kamo, with Maki, with Yuji, I mean, with just so many characters, it pretty much happens in all the fights. And then obviously we have the final stage when characters are not only even more bloody than usual, but they look tired and they're just sweating profusely. Now Yorozu actually falls into the same category as Kashimo did while he was fighting Jackpot Akari. She's just roughed up, which is just incredible to think that Yorozu could take all of the force of the 10 shadows like this and just honestly just be roughed up. I mean, she doesn't even have cuts, to the point that even if she has reverse curse technique, she doesn't even need to use it. She's not even been injured that much. Though of course, I'm not gonna gas Yorozu too much. Sukuna did a phenomenal display of using the 10 shadows to its maximum. This is how you're supposed to be using the 10 shadows. The 10 shadows is insanely versatile, and what he's doing is he's throwing multiple different Shikigami at Yorozu over and over, so she's literally just being overwhelmed with a variety of abilities and combinations of attacks, to the point that it's just hard to keep up because you can't just keep adapting to all of these hits. I mean, look at when he combined the rabbit escape to actually cover her vision completely so he could smash over the elephant, because she wouldn't have been hit by the elephant had it not been for the rabbit escape. Or look at how the deer actually, again, I don't want to say this is confirmed, but just from the spoilers, it actually looks like it cancelled out her curse technique, or at least removed it completely. So it can't just heal, but it can do that. And then right after the deer, while he was getting healed and cancelling a technique, the bull, now that the black liquid isn't there to defend her, the bull can now charge her. He is using it at a masterclass level, and he is just going at such a rapid pace that, again, it's just too hard to keep up. This is how you use the 10 shadows to its maximum potential. Incredible stuff. Obviously from Sukuna, and then obviously from Yorozu, who just got roughed up after all of this. Again, not a scratch on her, and she hasn't even taken enough damage for her to even use reverse curse technique if she even has it. So we can't even confirm if she has reverse curse technique or not, because she hasn't even taken enough damage yet, which is crazy to think, because this is Sukuna using the 10 shadows, a technique that rivals Gojo. And of course, excluding all of that, she has her insane feats in the beginning. Okay, so I hope I broke the chapter down well. Now let me explain why Yorozu just outscales everyone in the verse, and she's honestly looking like a top 5 character. Now, just a quick heads up, if you have not seen my How Strong is Sukuna video from last week, I would highly, and I mean highly, recommend that video to get a lot of context for what I'm about to say, and especially if you end up disagreeing by the end of this video, I would recommend watching that video, because what I say there, all of it does apply to Yorozu. But just to briefly break down the blitz feats that Sukuna has and why this is comparable to Yorozu. Sukuna, again, not cleave or dismantle, not his technique, but he himself twice, but most importantly the second time, blitzed Ryu so badly his attack speed actually blitzed Ryu's reaction speed, which is honestly a joke on how crazy it is. To actually be generous for Yuta and everyone else, I'll just say his attack speed because that actually makes it much more fair. But again, the fact that Sukuna's attack speed or combat speed completely blitzes Ryu, and what I mean is his actual movement speed, so again, not cleave dismantle. Before Ryu's brain can even process Sukuna has moved or Sukuna has done everything, Sukuna has physically moved behind Ryu, and then after he's behind him, he uses cleave. Physically behind him before his brain has processed what just happened. And again, this is a Ryu who scales directly to Yuta and directly to Rika only in terms of speed, strength, durability, power, and that is a complete fact. Of course, Yuta would mid-diff Ryu. Not even a high diff, I'd say he actually mid-diffs him if they have a true 1v1, but it's undoubtable and undisputable that in terms of speed, strength, durability, and everything I just said, physical stats, he is 1-to-1 of Rika very clearly. Again, I explain this in extreme depth in my How Strong is Sukuna video, if you are still doubting that. But I hope what I've just said, obviously that alone should be more evidence than nothing. And think about this Sukuna who can instant blitz, actually perception, true perception by the way, blitz Ryu, meaning he can do the same to Rika and Yuta. And again, if you think he can't do the same to Yuta and Rika, that would actually mean Yuta and most oddly enough Rika would have been holding back their speed dozens of times over to the point that Rika would actually nerf herself to allow Ryu to attack her every time, and had she wanted to, she could have dodged every point and teleported behind Ryu with insane speed, which, I mean, if you believe Yuta, especially Rika, were nerfing their speed dozens of times over, I don't know what to say. I guess you can believe what you want to believe. Sukuna, who can do that to them, is now getting at least, again, just physically blitzed by a serious Yorozu is incredible. And obviously we saw in the beginning of the fight when both Yorozu and Sukuna were taking it at default level, especially Yorozu, she was not going serious at all until she brought out her bug armor. She was having the fantasies and going crazy, was keeping up with a default Sukuna, and again a default Sukuna who blitzed Ryu, and I mean his first time, and I don't mean cleave. Again, before Ryu can even lift his arm in the first encounter, as we see that's Ryu's arm with a fluff on his coat, Sukuna sees it, reacts to it, activates his curse technique, and obviously cleave happens. All of this before Ryu can perceive it, and then before Ryu's hand actually raises. Again, excluding the cleave actually cutting him, he reacts to and activates his curse technique before Ryu even realizes he's moved in the first encounter, and that's a not serious Sukuna. And obviously we see, at a very least somewhat serious Sukuna, getting blitzed and bullied by Yorozu physically to the point where he actually needs to use the 10 shadows to its maximum potential and use it seriously, obviously not including Mahoroga, which to be fair he did try to summon, but you know, she did blitz him, so it is what it is. And though of course there is always the possibility that he's just using Mahoroga's ability because the wheel is on his back throughout the whole chapter. Just think about that. Sukuna is out blitzing Ryu, and by definite extension Yuta and Rika. Yorozu, who was not only keeping up with her before, but when she goes serious, she is now out blitzing him just physically though. Of course, Sukuna with his 10 shadows is able to keep up with her really well actually, because it's a very powerful technique, as we all know, one of the strongest techniques in the series. But I digress. What this means is that this form of Yorozu would actually obviously out blitz Rika and Yuta. I mean, she could do it in base as we saw from the previous chapter, but now it's just hardcore evidence that would insta blitz Yuta and Rika badly. And considering it is just disgusting, and the power that it has to actually make Sukuna bleed, again, it's not like he made Sukuna get cut up or be seriously injured, but the same amount of damage Yorozu actually took this chapter, Sukuna actually took a similar amount of damage in the beginning. I will say Yorozu was more roughed up, quote unquote, but Sukuna was still roughed up, and actually to the point where he actually decided to use reverse curse technique. It's so crazy, but that's what happened. I don't know what to say. But of course, they're both on the first level of taking damage. Neither of them have actually taken any sort of serious damage. And of course, with the deer having reverse curse technique, so Sukuna doesn't actually need to spend pretty much any sort of serious curse energy at all. It makes sense why he'd even use it, even if he's just roughed up. If the deer can just pretty much do it for free, right? It's just so OP. Like, my god, this deer is getting underestimated. Beside the fact that it potentially just dispelled Yorozu's technique, but the fact that it can heal, like, oh my god, even if you have reverse curse technique, it's just so OP. And of course, Yorozu would also blitz Kenjaku and Yuki the same. The only way you would think that Yuki and Kenjaku wouldn't get blitzed this way is if you think Yuki and Kenjaku outscale Yuta and Rika tremendously, and I mean many times over in terms of speed. And obviously, I don't believe that. I think it's crazy. But oddly enough, you can't actually disprove it, so it is what it is. And I actually just want to end it off with some love for Yuta and the Yuta fans, because I know they'll be upset by this video. Number one, I actually disagree with Yorozu being this strong, and what I mean is I just don't think she should be this strong, and I don't think 15-fingered Sukuna should be this strong. If I could choose, I would say Yorozu would mid to high diff Yuta, and 15-fingered Sukuna would mid to high diff Yuta. That's actually how I want it. I think the power creep that we're seeing is ridiculous. I don't actually like it, but unfortunately, even as a Yorozu fan, I don't want to see it, but it's what is happening. It's what the evidence is saying. And I do want to remind you, Ryu, who is a big challenge for Yuta, and obviously Yuta would beat him in a pure 1v1, it would be like a mid diff, not a low diff, but definitely not a high diff either. This is someone who is actually a tough challenge for Yuta, and he actually ended up being a great antagonist, and they had the whole final clash. And again, I'm not saying Yuta's as strong as him, I'm just saying they're actually pretty relative. And it's the fact that all of these chapters spent on Uro and Ryu had Sukuna been there, he would have ended both of them in like 3 or 4 pages. And I do think this is Gege actually showcasing us that the Heian era is just a different level of power. I mean, I've always said for many months that I do think the top tier of the Heian era or the Heian era should scale well above the top tier of the modern era, because the Heian era is just the strongest era. I mean, just look at the underlings and servants in the Heian era. They are special grade level like Uro and Urume, who have domain expansion, reverse curse technique, maximum outputs. And compare this to like underlings in JJK, where they're like semi-grade 1, or even the very strongest are grade 1. The gap is massive, so of course it makes sense why the top tiers would have a massive gap in power. Again, I never thought it'd be this big. And number 2, to defend my boy Yuta, I do think Yuta is going to get a big power. Whether he gets the 6 eyes and limitless, I actually explained that in my Yorozu video, I won't get into that now. But even beside that, I do think in general he has to get a big power. And the reason why it's very possible is, again, Yuta's only been a sorcerer for like a year and a half or something. He has a tremendous amount of untapped potential. He could easily just get a power up or 2 and just get a lot stronger. Because again, he's still a fresh sorcerer. There's a lot that hasn't been explored with his power. He's new to all this. Though of course, there is always the option that, and I pray to God this isn't the case, for no explainable reason, Yuta is just able to react to and keep up with 15-fingered Sukuna and Ryozu. The reason this would be an issue is because it would directly contradict the Sukuna one-shotting Ryu statement, Sukuna physically blitzing Ryu, and not only would it just not make sense in the writing, the only way it could actually be justified if Yuta and Rika were nerfing their speeds and powers dozens of times over. And I do think Yuta is holding back by not using lethal curse techniques or curse tools, but the speed and power is something else. So yeah, that is what we call bad writing and major, and I mean major power creep. It basically just make Yuta relevant and a lot stronger for no reason other than the plot requires it. So I do hope he doesn't go that route, because Gege has never done that before, and he's a great author. He's not like some other shonen authors who do that, and a power would just be awesome. I mean, come on, the Yuta fans, seeing him with the 6 eyes of limitless or seeing him with a power, that would be awesome, right? Come on, I don't think anyone would disagree with that. And again, if you do disagree with the Yorozu outscaling these characters, I do recommend How Strong is Sukuna video and the How Strong is Yorozu video, but I do explain a lot better in the How Strong is Sukuna video, and all of that can be applied to Yorozu. And again, she was blitzing Sukuna in the beginning, physically, just physically, and actually made Sukuna go bloodlusted for the first time in the series, and Sukuna used the 10 shadows to its absolute peak of how it should be used, excluding Mahoroga. And of course, domain expansion is a whole different thing. I mean, Yorozu definitely has one, and she hasn't actually been forced to use it yet either. Domain expansion is always saved for later on, so that's a whole different thing. But hey, if you have watched this far and you have not subscribed, I would recommend doing so. There's a ton of JJK content on the channel, a ton of power scaling, what ifs, versus battles, and I'll be going live today as well, probably as this video is going up, or a bit after this. So there's that too. And of course, if you enjoyed the video, whether you agreed or disagreed with anything, a like would be much appreciated. It's not like you're going to agree with everything in this video. The way I always take it is, if you at least agree with most of the things I've said and you disagree with some things, I'll take it, because JJK is a very complicated and vague series. Nothing is ever concrete, and it does help the video out. So if you did leave a like, thank you very much. And of course, thank you to all of these channel members. You can see all of your names on the screen right now. Thank you very much. It does help the channel out a lot. So much love. Thank you. And that's all. Take care, and I'll see all my Yorozu fans in the next video. Bye bye.